Greetings, Cap fans, and welcome to episode 2 of Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. I am your host, Rick Verbanis, and I am joined by my partner, Bob Lucius. Bob, how you doing today?
Man, it's another great day. Let's get to it.
Yeah, so today we're actually going to dive into a couple of comic books that we want to talk about with reintroducing Steve Rogers, and let's say reintroducing Captain America and in reintroducing Steve Rogers into the Marvel Universe back in 1963 and 1964, respectively. So today we'll talk about Strange Tales, number 114, and Avengers number 4. And I pause on that Strange Tales because, Bob, I don't know if you know, but the last episode, I kept referring to this as Strange Adventures.
That's
114.
Right. Yeah, well, it's understandable because it's quite an adventure. So I didn't fault you for that. It's a great book. It's a great tale, and really, it's really the beginning of a brand new era.
So let's start there, right? Let's start with Strange Tales 114, which was had a cover date of November 1963. And it was written by Stan Lee and drawn by Jack Kirby and inked by his longtime partner, Dick Ayers, and lettered by Sam Rosen. So this was a two-part series that starred Human Torch in one story and Doctor Strange in another story. And so that's kind of they did a lot of books like that back then. So in this one, if you're looking at the cover, it is the Human Torch throwing one of his patented fireballs at Captain America. And so if you are in 1963 and you see this, you're like, Captain America, I remember him. And sure enough, in big, bold starburst on the cover, it says, "From out of the golden age of comics." I love the fact that in 1963 they're referring to it as the golden age. But anyway,
yeah,
out of the golden age of comics into the Marvel age, Captain America returns to challenge the Human Torch. There's a little word balloon on there. I miss the word balloons. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
I miss the word balloons and the thought balloons on covers. But Human Torch says, "Impossible though it seems, one of the most fabulous superheroes of the past is now my enemy." And then a little note at the bottom, "See the torch soar to new heights of greatness." So they're already like kind of putting this Captain America character up on a pedestal, right? I mean, it's, huge deal. And he's one of the most fabulous superheroes, right? So on the splash page, you've got the Human Torch meets Captain America. Please don't reveal the surprise ending of this tale. I preface this. I'm going to take a little pause here. I preface this by saying Captain America was co-created by Jack Kirby. Stan Lee, I believe one of Stan Lee's first comic scripts ever published was in Captain America Comics. So both of these guys have an affinity for this character, right? They already like this character. And so I think they really want to bring this character back. And maybe, I don't know. I don't know the story. Maybe it's written out there and someone can tell us. But, maybe the publisher or whomever said, I don't know. You got to convince us on that. So this is a story to convince people to bring Captain America, the character, back.
What's great here, Rick, is it's only been 9 years since Cap was last featured in comics, right? I mean,
right.
So but that's a lifetime, right, for comic book readers, right? 9 years. I mean, that's your entire childhood, right? So essentially, a whole generation of children that grew up reading comic books weren't exposed to Cap. So it might as well have been 40 years, right? I mean, looking back on the golden age. So this really is a big deal when Cap shows up on the cover of Strange Tales.
Yeah, and they throughout the story, they kind of talk about that and mention that, right? That it's been such a long time. Um, but and you say 9 years, right? Because that was the last time that Captain America, I want to say 78, was published, right, in September of 1954. And so yes, it has only been that, but hasn't it really been longer? We'll find out in Avengers 4. But
Right.
so this Strange Tales starts off with Johnny Storm. He's out in the street practicing, doing his daily practicing, and he's there with his older sister. And these teens come rushing up, and they basically say, Johnny, guess what? Captain America is going to be appearing at this vintage car show because he's been gone for all this time. He's well, what better place for him to just make appearances at a vintage car show?
Well, I'll tell you what. When I was a kid, Rick, I went to see Batman and Robin, at a car show. So, straight off TV, right at the car show. So it makes sense.
Yeah. So Johnny Storm goes, and as he's there, these couple of crooks come busting in, and they steal the gate money, and they're driving off, right? So Johnny comes after him, and out of nowhere, and this is a nice half-page splash by Jack Kirby, right? Out of nowhere, you've got Captain America, and he's wearing red shorts over top of his costume, which throughout this entire thing he's wearing red shorts. Now, I will say, I digress, I'm sorry, but if you go back to the cover, he's not, right? He's not wearing red shorts. But if you look closely, they're kind of purple. They're kind of purple on the cover. Right. I'm thinking it was red to begin with, and someone said, no, Captain America wears blue shorts. So they went and they colored it in, and it's definitely a different shade. So it looks like it was maybe formerly red on the cover. But anyway, so Cap comes in, and he says, one side, Sonny, I'll handle this. So they're already setting up that he's older, right? He hasn't been around for a while, so he's mentioning to the youth, Sonny. And then he goes and he jumps onto the car of the crooks, and he's about to stop them, but Johnny Storm goes and he melts the paveway, and the car gets stopped, and this upsets Captain America, right? He's like, hey, beat it, you flaming freak! Look how messy you made everything. If I need any help, I'd ask you for it. And he slings some of the mud, but then next thing you know, the Human Torch says, he's a teenager, right? So he's like, you want to fight? I'll fight you. And he goes and he flings some fire bombs at him, and then he decides to leave. So he goes back to his place, and there's his girlfriend, and his girlfriend is just looking at some Captain America comic books, and she's like, he's my idea of a real man, handsome, modest, strong. Sigh, I wonder who he really is. So Johnny's already kind of getting a little jealous here, right? So he gets a little mad. He can't keep the flames back. So next thing you know, he leaves, and after causing a little problem, and as he's flying away, he says, but I still wish I knew where he came from and why he waited so many years to show up again. Foreshadowing.
Yeah, foreshadowing there.
So then you see Captain America. He's out and about. He's going rooftop to rooftop, and he's swinging, and he's going on flagpoles and going on tight ropes. So he's definitely a very acrobatic type of character. Then he gets to the prison, and he busts the two guys out because they're already in prison, and so they get out, and so the reader's left wondering, well, what's going on here? Like, why would Captain America do this? He's supposed to be a hero. And so next thing you know, the two crooks are driving away, and Johnny Storm comes after them and captures them, and he forces them to talk. And Johnny Storm wasn't part of the plan, right? So the crooks are like, hey, this is way more than I bargained for, and they tell him, and they said, look, Cap, that's not really Cap. He's somebody else impostoring him, and he's supposed to be robbing a bank right now. So Johnny runs or flies over to the bank, and sure enough, there's Cap. He's got the loot, and then he hits a little remote, and he's flying up into this little trapeze up into the air into, Bob, get this, into a some sort of helicopter heli device floating pad rocket,
Right.
right? Yeah, because these crooks,
Yeah.
they have this kind of money and know-how, right?
Right.
And again, I'm going to digress a little bit here. Years later, I don't know, maybe 2000, early 2000, mid 2000, something like that. There was a story that I guess the Marvel writers got together and said, we got to explain how these guys get all this stuff. I don't know. Was that Secret War? I don't remember. I don't remember the story, but they basically were like that these crooks were all being funded by a master criminal, and that's how over the years they've always had these fancy goods. Anyway, so Human Torch blasts the thing, the rocket. Cap jumps out, parachute. They land. They fight. Cap very conveniently goes into a sporting goods store. Now, when he's in there, he immediately grabs the mop and bucket from the cleaning guy, and he soaks the mop really wet, right? And he gets one of the bows, because he's in a sporting goods store, and he gets one of the bows, puts the mop on it as an arrow, shoots it at the incoming Human Torch, who soaks him just enough that he can't redo his flames, and then the Cap goes ahead and he puts these handcuffs on him. So Johnny Storm, he's soaked. He can't reignite his flame. So the cleaning guy brings over all these different heating devices, and then sure enough, Human Torch escapes. He's chasing after this imposter Cap, and so the Captain America, as he's behind the wheel of this truck, he says, he's coming after me again, just as I knew he would. Good thing I had time to steal this special type of truck. Of course, right? This special type of truck. So he then tricks the Human Torch to going into the truck, and he thinks that he's done. He's saved. But there's 3 panels left on the page. So of course the Human Torch will bust out of this. So Johnny says, while he's inside this truck, he outsmarted me again. It's an asbestos line truck.
Of course, asbestos, right? Because back then it was a miracle fabric.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes. But I'm not quitting now. The last trick will still be mine. Captain America forgot one thing. In an enclosed area like this, the flame energy is turned into gas. And gas, forming a compression in such an airtight space, must find some way to expand. And of course, the only way for gas to expand is by causing an explosion, power enough to shatter a lock. So thank you, Stan Lee, for that little science.
Yeah, people thought at the time that comics weren't educational, but they were.
You know what? Part of me when I was reading this was like, was this their way of saying, hey, we're going to throw in some stuff here so that, the kids reading comics in the early 60s could be like, no, Mom, look, I'm learning something.
That's right.
So then Human Torch, he captures the fake Captain America. He pulls off his mask and he reveals that it's actually the Acrobat with his mustache shaved off, which was last seen in Strange Tales 106. So this story ends, the last 3 panels, and I need to read these. So reaching his home, Johnny pours through his prized collection of old comic mags until, and then he says, here it is, one of the earliest Captain America mags. Boy, I sure dug this guy the most. I remember how he used to secretly change from Army Private Steve Rogers to the great Captain America. Sigh. And then the thought bubble. Wonder whatever did become of him. Is he still alive? Will he ever return? I'd sure like to know. You guessed it. This story was really a test to see if you too would like Captain America to return. As usual, your letters will give us the answer. So that's your Strange Tales 114. Bob, what's your immediate thoughts on this?
Man, I love this book. Not only do I love the cover, it's one of the ones I like most to display around my house in my office because it is just such an iconic cover. But the story, it takes me back to being 10, 11, 12 years old. This is the sort of comic book story that really reaches out and grabs a young person's imagination. I mean, it was great. It's hokey, reading it as a 53-year-old. Yeah, there's a lot of hokiness, but it's
Yeah.
just classic Silver Age writing, and it's just great. And I'm sure you know this, but in a later book, back up, I think around September 1999, in the Captain America Sentinel Liberty series, there's a sequel to this where the Human Torch is explaining to Steve Rogers, Captain America, what took place in this story. And so there's a lot of extra detail and embellishments. And at the end of that story, together, they capture the acrobat who was once again in the process of robbing a bank. And Cap gets to confront the guy who tried to impersonate him. I mean, he's incredulous that Johnny ever thought this could possibly be him. It's just ludicrous to him. But
Right.
it's great, man. It's a great, great story.
Right. I agree. I had a lot of fun rereading this again. And, and maybe it's the marketing guy in me, but I read the little cues throughout the story where they, they're really placing Cap on a pedestal, right? They're really trying to his girlfriend really likes him, and he at the end loves the magazine. He's a super guy. They even say at the end, right? What was it? That to see if you too would like Captain America to return. So it's Johnny wants him to return. Do
Doris
you?
certainly
Yeah,
does. Yeah.
yeah. Do you want him to return? Do you want to be like Johnny and Doris? So, yeah, it's kind of fun. And again, I don't blame him. I mean, if I was Jack and Stan at the time, I'm looking for fresh ideas. I would want to go back and do this as well. So that brings us to our next issue we're going to cover, right, is Avengers
Yeah.
number 4. So this one, took me back as well, right? Avengers 4, which, this came out March of 1964. Am I
Yeah.
getting that right?
Yeah. Just a few months later.
Yeah. So obviously the letters, came pouring in. So they wanted to bring him back and bring him into their number one group, the Avengers. So let's take a look at that, right? So this was written by Stan Lee and illustrated by Jack Kirby once again. So this duo is responsible for so many great stories and characters. So on the cover here, iconic cover, right? Is big Jack Kirby bold style. Is Cap is leaping out, leading the Avengers. Like already just from the cover is showing his command, and the Avengers following him. It is interesting that the shield, has 4 stripes to it, has some blue in it, and this is kind of inconsistent throughout the issue. You're going to see sometimes where there's some blue, sometimes where there's not. In some cases, it maybe looks like there's a 5th ring to it. So, some inconsistencies, but you know what? They were pumping these issues out so quickly back then, and Jack being on so many comics, they didn't have time to have as much continuity and consistency as they do nowadays.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've read about all kinds of inconsistency in uniforms. Even in some of the early Golden Age books, and it's we look at these characters, and we look for every possible little detail and where there's an inconsistency. We're huge fans, but a lot of the creative talent along the way, as you said, they were pumping out dozens of books, and stories, and they may not have been necessarily as wedded to the attention to detail that we take for granted among the fan base.
Yep. So certainly we'll keep that in the back of our mind as we're reading this, and try not to be overly critical. because it is an iconic issue for sure. So the splash page, again, grabbing people's attention and letting them know just how important this character is. I have to read this. So Captain America joins the Avengers, a tale destined to become a magnificent milestone in the Marvel age of comics, bringing you the great superhero which your wonderful avalanche of fan mail demanded. And then I love here at the bottom, editor's note.
Right, yeah.
We sincerely suggest you save this issue. We feel you will treasure it in time to come. Now, what comic book fan has not wished for a time machine, right?
Right.
What comic book fan is it like, if I had a time machine, I would go back and I would get all these issues that I never had, or I'd get, multiple copies. I'd be a millionaire. But yeah, if congrats to all those that read this issue and saved it like the editor suggested.
Yeah, heeded that advice. I tell you, this guy right here, because I was driving up north here this morning for an appointment, and I got to tell you, I was thinking in my car, I was actually imagining what I would have done if I could have gone back in time and bought, a couple copies of this issue off the rack. How would I have stored them? Where would I have put them so that 53-year-old me could go unearth them and get this book? Because I know you have one, and I know a lot of folks have them, but this is a grail to a lot of folks, including me. So it's the editor was spot on.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, absolutely. It is a grail. And I was lucky enough to get this a couple of years ago. After decades and decades of wanting one. It's low grade, but I don't care. It's mine.
Yeah.
And I certainly value it. So getting back to the splash page, the other thing they put here is the Mighty Marvel Comic Group is proud to announce that Jack Kirby drew the original Captain America during the golden age of comics, and now he draws it again. Also, Stan Lee's first script during those fabled days was Captain America, and now he authors it again. Thus, the Chronicle of Comicdom turns full circle, reaching a new pinnacle of greatness. So there you have it. They are recognizing, the partly creators of Captain America, because we don't want to leave out Joe Simon, but part of the creators of the character and bringing it forward. So I think they're also trying to establish, why they have this character, why they are bringing him back. So it was interesting. So let's go through the issue, okay? Let's take a look. So it starts with the Avengers, kind of a recap, showing a battle with Namor, Submariner, and they were battling him last issue after the Hulk vanished. So Submariner retreats. He lost. He ends up just so upset that he distanced himself and spends hours traveling, and he finds himself in the north, and he comes across a village of Eskimos who are praying to this figure that is trapped in ice. And Submariner, because he's still angry, and when is he not angry? He goes and he takes the figure and he hurls it into the ocean, and he goes in a little anger spree and breaks up things. And so the next thing you know, this figure is floating and finds itself into the Gulf Stream. And next thing you know, the Avengers, who are in their handy dandy submarine, I suppose they're out there looking for the Submariner. I don't know. It's not explained. But they come across him and they grab him and they pull him in. And sure enough, we're only on page 4. Boom, it's Captain America, and they reveal underneath his costume, or underneath these tatters, that he's there with his shield. And so they realize that he's not dead, he's breathing, and Cap wakes up, and the first thing he yells is, Bucky, look out. and you can't kill him. You can't kill Bucky. I won't let you. I'll smash you all. And the next thing you know, he's fighting the Avengers because he's kind of coming out of this coma, if you will, and then he comes to his senses. He realizes that um, that uh, Bucky's dead, and he wants to know where he is. How did I get here? Who are you? And so Iron Man asks, "Well, we're about to ask you." And he says, "Who am I?" For a moment, I had almost forgotten myself, but I'm not lucky enough to forget forever. To forget that I was once the man the world called Captain America. So I found that, I don't know about you, Bob, I found that a little interesting. Like, no one told him what year it was. No one told him he was out of time. So I don't know why he's referring to him as the man that once was called Captain America.
That's a good point. Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, next page, the Avengers don't seem to believe this, and he's like, "Well, go ahead and test me." And so they start to grapple, and Captain America's showing off his abilities, and so they believe him, right? Because but they want to know why hasn't he aged, and so they want to get an explanation. And so now here we are on page 7, and we get into retcon, right? So this is when I guess Stan Lee, maybe Jack Kirby, decided we're going to change the fact that Captain America was last seen in 1954, and instead say he was last seen in 1945 at the end of the war. So Captain America starts to explain via a flashback that he and Bucky, who were on a motorcycle chasing this experimental drone plane, and they chase after it. Bucky grabs on. He's trying to defuse it. Steve falls off, and Bucky explodes in with the plane, and he goes into the ocean, which is the last thing he remembers. The Avengers believe him, and they're coming back to New York, and they can't wait to let everybody know what's happening. So the press is there waiting, and the Avengers get out first, right? Because they want to kind of explain everything before they just throw Captain America out to the public. But the next thing you know, there's a flash, and the bodies are replaced with these statues, and so the photographers, the news people, they're all like, what happened? I don't know. Let's go. So they leave. And then Cap finally comes out and he's like, hey, where'd everybody go? And he sees the statues. He's like, well, that's kind of odd. And he starts to wander the streets, and he starts to see that he is in a different time. And he's noticing the different clothes, different hairstyles. And he's really, at this point, becoming that man out of time, right? This is the very first time that we witness Cap being that iconic story that has been going on ever since.
Yeah. No, that's you're absolutely right. And that last the panel in the lower left of page 9 of him sort of looking up at the UN, that's a crazy scene. And of course, we've seen it almost in the cinematic universe when Cap wakes up in the films and he's out in Times Square, and taken directly from that panel, because that is the man waking up to see a world that is different than the one he left behind.
Yeah, and as we go along, we're seeing different people recognize him. They're like, oh, I recognize him, back when I was a kid, or my father told me about him, and oh, I can't believe it's you, and people are getting sentimental, and so they're building up the fact that Captain America is this really big deal. So Cap then this police officer directs Captain America to a nearby hotel. He sees television. He decides to take a rest. He's tired. He drifts off, and next thing you know, he wakes up and he sees this young lad walking toward him, and he's like, Bucky, it's you. You've come back, Bucky. You've come back. And it's not Bucky. It's Rick Jones, right? And apparently Rick Jones is not only the partner of the Incredible Hulk, but he's a master pick lock because he just somehow managed to get into Steve's room. But so Steve and Rick start talking, and Rick is accusing him of doing something with the Avengers, but Steve says, "Okay, well let's go find them," and enlist the aid of the Teen Brigade. Right?
Yeah.
Gotta love the
Love
Teen
that.
Brigade.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was another, and again, this is the marketing guy in me. Sorry, everybody, but this is another way of trying to get the teenagers of the time to feel like they're part of the story and to pull them in. It's a brilliant way to get more readers.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. But that's a throwback too, right? To Bucky and the Sentinels of Liberty, the Young Allies, and the call that at that time Timely put out for young men and women, young boys and girls to do their part. So I wonder if that was an intentional callback to that earlier time.
yeah, that's a good point. I know back then Jack Kirby and Joe Simon did other things like the Newsboy Legion
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. So yeah, very very well could be a kind of a callback to that. So Cap somehow, after doing a search, comes across this particular character that they saw in a photo that they think caused the Avengers to turn to statues. So he busts in. He fights the goons. He gets through them. They're all marveled by his ability and his fighting prowess and agility. And he eventually gets to the ringleader. And as he's talking to him, he realizes, he pulls off his mask. He's an alien. Of course, it's an alien. So the goons all run off. They had no idea they were working for an alien. And so then we get the backstory of the alien, who says that many years ago his ship crash landed and he into the ocean. I
I think
guess
he
you
was
could.
just yeah, he was just traveling, and his spaceship broke down and landed here. Right? He's been trying to get help ever since.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he has this freeze ray that turns people into statues for 100 Earth hours. And because of his crazy hair, Cap's like, oh, people must have thought you were Medusa, yeah, and bring that lure in. So
See, another lesson to tell mom that you learned a little bit of Greek and Roman mythology from your comics.
exactly.
Yeah.
The alien then goes on to say that he was why he used his power against the Avengers was because the one who calls himself Submariner. He found me some days ago, told me he would free my ship from the ocean's depth if I would turn the Avengers to stone. I had to do it. And I found this interesting. Ready? Submariner, Cap says. I seem to remember that name from the dim past.
Yeah.
But time enough for that later.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean that's that always strikes me when I get to that panel as well, right? Because there's a lot of history there for Cap, and of course we won't get to a lot of that history till later on in the series and subsequent volumes where they'll further explore that relationship. But it leaves one wondering, like why we know why Submariner doesn't. They've sort of addressed that question, what happened to him and his memories, but why doesn't Cap remember?
And I think they address this later on. I think they do say that because he was coming out of that coma, he was having some problems with memory.
Right. Yeah.
But at least they do say he remembers that name somehow. But you know what, Bob, that I also find in this one panel, right, where Cap's grabbing the alien and says, come on. He says, first, you must bring the Avengers back to life, and we will free your ship for you. And the alien says, if only you mean it. If only I can believe you. And what does Cap say? Captain America does not lie.
Yep.
Love it.
Love
That's
it.
right then and there. He's pointing out that he is a man of ethics and morals, and he doesn't lie, right? So the alien restores the statues back into the Avengers. And next thing you know, Submariner, he's he's on a mission, right? He wants to go and attack the Avengers. Um, but before that, so the Avengers, good to their word. They go find the ship, and they're trying to restore the ship. They help the alien and get the ship, and so now he has to repair it, but at least it's now no longer stuck in the Earth's crevice. And so next thing you know, Submariner shows up and he attacks the Avengers, but this time he's got an army with him, right? So as he attacks the Avengers, Cap and Giant Man fall into the ocean, and then there's this couple of pages of battle scene between Submariner and the Avengers. So first he's battling Iron Man, then he's battling Thor, and so it's well, we're here to talk about Captain America, so we won't get into all of those. But a few pages later, we do see Cap, and he's watching the fight because again, he's new to all these people, so he's not really sure everything going on. But he says, I know so little about this new crop of costume fighters. My best bet is to watch them in action, see how powerful they really are. Their courage is undeniable. Even the Submariner is a fearless foe. If there had been such men in my day, what epic battles we might have fought. So, yeah, he's not remembering Submariner at this point. He's, again, watching. Next thing you know, Submariner brings out Rick Jones, who is a captive, right? And but hey, that's like his Cap's trigger point, right? Like it's like, no, we're not having a Bucky all over again. The lad's in danger. This I will not tolerate. So he, out of nowhere, comes from behind Submariner and gets Rick Jones free. And the Submariner says, another one, but who? So he doesn't recognize him, right? And then all of a sudden the island starts to erupt. Submariner feels he won. Him and his army leave, but it really wasn't the island erupting. It was the aliens' spaceship fixed and leaving. So the Avengers, managed to get by this fight, and at this point, they make an offer. They make an offer to Captain America to join the Avengers, and and the caption says, "Thus, we are privileged to witness a momentous moment in the annals of high adventure. We welcome you, Captain America, to the ranks of the Avengers." And then it ends with Rick Jones, who says, thinking about the Hulk, he thinks the Hulk will come back someday. And when he finds out that Captain America's replaced him, will anything be able to stop him then? And then it ends with, but nothing in life is certain, and we must take the good and the bad as fate deals them out. One thing is certain, though. Next issue of the Avengers will have more superheroes, supervillains, and super thrills, just as you want them. And that is the momentous issue that the editors told us that we need to save. And it was fun. It was fun going through that issue again and rereading it.
Yeah, and the repercussions of that issue, I mean, what it meant for Marvel going forth, just can't be underestimated, right? Because Cap eventually takes over leadership of the Avengers, and that's if you recall earlier on in the story, Rick says, "Oh my God, this guy, he's used to being obeyed and fast, right? I mean, this guy exudes leadership, right? He's a natural born leader." And as you mentioned in last podcast, a strategician and a tactician as well. So he is perfectly suited to take up the mantle of leadership. But what's really interesting here is, they made a fateful decision regarding Bucky, right? Because although they retcon Captain America, Steve Rogers, but they also made a fateful decision with Bucky Barnes, and one that would go down as the Bucky rule, right? Two guys that are never coming back, Bucky and Uncle Ben, because their deaths are so central to the mythos of the respective characters. But in this last panel, it's interesting because Stan Lee has said that he was not a fan of teenage sidekicks, right? And that's one of the decision points about why Bucky wasn't coming back, and Bucky was retconned as dying in that crash. But in that second to last panel, Rick Jones says he's the greatest guy I ever met, and I could tell he wants me to be his partner. So
Mm-hmm.
already, there's a little bit of an inkling that Rick is going to, pick up where Bucky left off, at least for a short time.
Yeah, and it really was a monumental issue on so many levels, right? Because not only did they bring back this classic character and pay an homage to what came before, right? They acknowledged Jack Kirby and Stan Lee's work. They through the storytelling, mentioned many characters. They were just in all of him. So there was a lot of referencing what came before. But at the same time, they retconned the fact that, well, Steve, this happened in 1945. So what happened? Those other 8 years or so, 9 years of Cap stories. So that'll be part of an interesting conversation that we can have throughout this podcast. When other stories come up, we can. Okay, so up next, we have our guest joining the show, Jesse Simon. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he's the grandson of Joe Simon, who is the co-creator with Jack Kirby of Captain America. So we're pretty excited to talk with him. He's going to let us know a little bit about his stories with his grandfather, and also talk about his love and affection for the golden age of Captain America comics. So looking forward to talking with Jesse next. Okay, so we'd like to welcome to the show Jesse Simon. Jesse, so Joe Simon, back 1940, 80 years ago this month, created Captain America. He had did the actual sketch of the character, and laid out his character, his costume, and described him. Then he went on to write and he did layouts of the very first Captain America comics #1. So we all have Joe Simon to thank for this character that we all know and love. What is your relation to Joe Simon?
Well, Joe was my grandfather, and I was the youngest of 8 grandchildren. And so growing up around Joe, I saw Captain America everywhere, and Joe was very proud of his character, paintings on the walls and everything. And yeah, Joe was just very proud of his character, Captain America, from the start. You had mentioned the concept art of Captain America, which still is in existence today. It's in the Library of Congress. That piece he kept all the way from Captain America hit the stands December of 1940. So that piece was probably drawn late 39, early 40s, 1940. So that character was always very close to him, and he kept that piece for decades.
With being the youngest of 8 grandchildren, right? And Joe passed away at the age of 98 in December of 2011. So it's been 9 years. So you were pretty young at the time. Did you get many opportunities to spend time with him?
Oh yeah, I frequently visited him in the city. My father and mother would bring me to go see him, check on him, see how he's doing. And we would just have what I call these lazy Saturdays, where we would just sit around, watch TV, usually eat ice cream. He always made sure that that there was ice cream in the fridge for me, because I love this type of, I think it was a Haagen-Dazs popsicle. And it was, chocolate coverings with the vanilla. And every time I'd go, I'd run to the freezer and I'd get one of those. And then I'd bring him one. So we would eat them together, watch. He loved college football. No, college basketball. He actually really liked. Because I think it reminded him of his youth. But yeah, and what I do is his drawing table always had markers, pens, brushes, paint everywhere. And he had a very special pile for me, which was just a stack of papers. And it wasn't printer paper. It was good quality paper, drawing paper, a little too small for what he was drawing, because he was drawing recreations and much larger pieces of work. But in that stack, he had that paper reserved for me, and I would just go there, sit in his chair, and just start drawing with the Sharpies. I remember that very vividly. And he had this very nice view from his next to his drawing table. And so he would sit in his recliner, which he loved. And that was directly in the center of the room, so he could watch his TV and see his art table at the same time. And that's what I would really do. Besides attending conventions with him, I did attend, I would say, close to 8 conventions with him throughout my life.
Mm-hmm.
The earlier ones when I was 3, 4, that I no recollection of. There were other times that I went with him, and seeing the line of people just waiting to meet him and being so excited when they did, just to say thank you. That was pretty unique. And at that time, I didn't really think anything of it. But now that I grew up, I kind of realized not everyone's grandfather was like that. And when I was that age, I just thought, everyone's well, it didn't even come across my mind that why does my grandfather have artwork on his walls, and why does he draw all the time? Never really thought of it that way. But going back to me drawing on his table, I would show him my artwork, and I have a few photos of me showing him my artwork. And he would always give me pointers, telling me how this should be in relation to this. And I would draw my family, in like the classic box figures. He told me not to draw stick figures. So I would do the box figures. And I remember once very vividly that I drew mountains, and I drew one up close, and it was really large. And I drew one in the back, so I made the mountain really small. And he was very impressed. He said, that's perception. And he was very impressed by that. And a few pieces of my artwork, he signed on the top saying, Jesse Simon's my grandson, and I'm endorsing him. It was more of a joke, but he was very proud, and I was just happy to make him proud.
Did you ever draw Captain America or any of his characters? That he's done so many obviously Captain America is the one everybody knows, right? But there was the Fighting American, there were Boy Commandos, the Newsboy Legion. He mm-hmm. was involved with so many different creations. Did you ever draw any of those, and what was his reaction?
Oh yeah, there's one of them I drew Captain America. In school I would draw Captain America too, during art project days. And I remember in second grade, Joe was still alive. This was about 2010, maybe 2009. We had, I think every Wednesday was art day. And it was basically the whole day was dedicated to art, my favorite day. And I remember my teacher wanting my grandfather to come in and talk to the kids and stuff like that. But even in school, I would draw Captain America at his place. I would draw Captain America with a shield, and I tried the best I could. But looking back at it now, I wasn't. It could have been a lot worse. That's how I think about it. But I would draw Captain America. I don't remember drawing any of his other characters, but Captain America and Bucky. And I used to refer to myself as Bucky, which is another one of his creations, because I think maybe he even told me that I'm Bucky, or he views me as Bucky, something like that. But I do remember drawing Captain America. So
when you drew Cap's shield, right? I know Joe was particular about people drawing the shield. Do you want to share that a little bit?
Yeah. Every time, that Joe drew the shield, he always made sure that the image was towards the reader. He hated when you saw the back of the shield, because it's just 2 straps, and who really wants to see that? He says that the image of the shield has to be towards the reader. I mean, Joe later in life went into advertisement. He did a lot of advertising work. And so part of that is when you reach the audience, and even this in comics, before he did comics, he did newspaper. And so you got to grab the reader's attention. And so he said, because the shield is a symbol, so you have to show it to the reader. The reader doesn't want to see the back of the shield. So he would always make sure that the shield was towards the reader.
Yeah, that's really great stuff, Jesse. And I've been, you really have picked up the torch for your granddad's legacy and preserving it. And I've seen your contributions in a lot of the Golden Age Facebook groups. And of course, you started I believe, the Joe Simon Appreciation Facebook group, and you contribute a lot on the Captain America comic fans Facebook group as well. But is your interest in Cap strictly limited to the Golden Age contributions of Joe and his partner Jack, and some of the creative teams that came after him, or have you paid attention to what happened after the Golden Age passed by and we moved into the Silver Age? Have you kind of kept tabs on Cap throughout the years?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll say this. When I started collecting comics, I never thought I could afford the Golden Age stuff, which my grandfather worked on. Joe worked on issues 1 through 10 with Jack. That's all they did in the Golden Age. And I never thought that I would own them in the next decade. I thought, I would have to win the lottery in order to afford even one of them. So what I did was, instead of collecting Joe stuff, I said, you know what, let me at least collect the Silver Age Captain America issues. So I have read a good amount of those, and they're very nice. Jack Kirby and Sid Shores, they've teamed up again in the Silver Age. Captain America issues 103, I believe, is a Kirby and Shores cover, which that one, had the Red Skull looming over Captain America. And I always like that kind of stuff. Growing up, though, a lot of the artwork surrounding was Golden Age styled. The artwork, the figures, the posing, the storytelling. And Joe had a lot of trade paperbacks. I never saw his comic collection in person. He never brought comics out to show me. Now, I may have been in the room when they were out, when he was doing something with, in terms of the press, maybe, but I don't remember that. But what I do remember is him having trade paperbacks, and he even gave me Captain America 1 through 10 trade paperbacks, which he signed for me. He gave me a copy signed, and he gave one that it wasn't signed. And I still have those to this day. But so growing up around that kind of style, I was always drawn towards the Golden Age. And I would say it's very hard to keep up with, it's very hard to be a Captain America fan and not be kept up with everything that he's gone through. Right. Watching the movies, you see how Bucky evolved from Bucky to Winter Soldier. Even if you don't read the comics, you've kind of seen what has happened to him, and all of that originated in comics. So to directly answer your question, yeah, I have kept up. I've read majority of the Silver Age issues, the Tales of Suspense, the Captain America, Cap being in the Avengers, and it's great, as well as the Golden Age stuff with Joe and Jack for the first 10 issues, and then you had Sid Shores and Al Avison for the later issues. And we can't forget the Schomburg covers. Those are always great to look at, the war stuff.
Right.
So it's been amazing to see how much he's changed from the wartime to now, and him in Vietnam, and then the 90s, then Winter Soldier, and all this, and his story really progressed.
So you mentioned the movie, right? So the first movie, which was with Chris Evans, and it was the first Avenger, which took place during World War II. Great movie. I know you had an opportunity to watch that movie with Joe, right? What was Joe's reaction to seeing his creation played by Chris Evans on the big screen?
Well, that day we saw it in Times Square. Joe lived in Manhattan, so the screening was in Times Square. It was an advanced screening, and I remember going after school. It was maybe about 5-6 p.m., and I believe it was a Thursday too. And so it was a very fancy theater, and we went into a small theater room. From what I remember, it was a pretty small room. I remember the room, and it was pretty small, and it was a Thursday, and I wanted to watch the movie with Joe. And my father had said, no, he's coming a different day. Because at the age of, he was 97 at the time, turning 98 that year in a few months, they kind of got to work around him. So it was a Thursday, and I really wanted to watch it with Joe. My father said, no, he's coming on a Tuesday. And I heard a commotion going on towards the door. This was a few minutes before the movie was about to start. And in walks my grandfather. And so I was very surprised. And so I tell my dad, Joe's here. And he said, no, he's coming, he's trying to tell me again that he already told me. But he looks back and even he was surprised. He didn't know that Joe was coming that day. So, immediately I ran up to him. I left my parents and he was sitting on the aisle seat in the very back row. And he knew I wanted to sit next to him. So he moved the seat that was supposed to be next to him and I sat there and we watched the movie together the whole time, being 7 and watching it was a PG-13 movie. So it was a little new to me. I honestly, I probably didn't know why I was there, but to watch a movie. And so I didn't know what the movie was going to hold. So I watched the movie with him the whole time because there was one armrest. I had my little arm on there and he put his hand over mine. So he was holding my hand the whole time. And so we watched the movie. I know he really liked that transformation scene between Steve Rogers and when he goes from the small guy to the big guy. He was very impressed with the technology and how they could do that. And the other part that I really, really remember was the Red Skull when he went from Johann Schmidt and he took off his mask. And by then, Joe was kind of falling asleep a little bit because it was getting a little late. Now it's probably, it was kind of 8 p.m.
Sure.
And, but he was nodding off a little. And I remember because they had that little fight on the bridge. And I remember he was kind of at his neck, pulling at something. So then I moved my arm, to wake Joe. And so Joe woke up and he started seeing that they pulled the mask off to reveal the Red Skull and his eyes widened like no other. He was so impressed by the makeup because, he saw the 1990 version of Captain America with the Red Skull and it looked like the Thing painted red. He saw that. He wasn't impressed. He wasn't happy with it. And he saw it and he was so amazed how they were able to bring his creation to life, seeing the Red Skull look dangerous, but also human. He looked like a regular person he looked like as if a person had his face melted off. And so he was so in shock about that. And, then the rest of the movie, he was so energized and he had energy. He was watching Captain America storm the Hydra base and he loved it. And he thought Chris Evans was just perfect as Steve Rogers, as Captain America, when he was skinny and when he turned into Cap. He thought that he was great. He looked like what Steve Rogers would look like, and he acted, the way Steve Rogers would. So he was very happy with that casting. And the Red Skull, he really, and even Bucky Barnes, he was very happy with Sebastian Stan and his performance.
Over the years, you have been really working hard to preserve your grandfather's legacy, Jesse. I mean, you, as I mentioned earlier, you created the Joe Simon Appreciation Facebook page, I think back in 2018. And recently you've been offering signed prints as well as your own recreations of some of his better known work. I mean, what motivates you to put that level of commitment into it? I mean, I realize, it must feel amazing that your grandfather has, his work has inspired and motivated so many children over the course of many generations and adults as well, me being one of them. But really, what drives you?
Well, I got to see Joe for about 8 years. And I always say, when you're at that age, you remember stuff, but you don't remember everything. And you feel almost as if you've been cut short of what you deserve. And I always felt, I always say, I wish I got to see Joe longer. I always wish that he got to see Captain America 2. And if he did, then I wanted him to be around to see Captain America 3. And I never wanted him to go. And so many people that knew him wanted the exact same thing. Now, no one lives forever. So, let's bring us back to reality. But going to conventions with him, seeing that long line of fans that he had, and seeing even when he passed, I went back to conventions. I didn't go back right away because I was still relatively young. My father, when he goes, he has all the memories of Joe, and he gets kind of sad by it. And but even when I started going back by myself, and I attend regularly now the New York conventions, I see so many people wearing Captain America shirts. I see Captain America movies And the people that go and watch it 3, 4, 5 times, and I see people on the internet saying how they embody Steve Rogers, how they want to be like him, how they are really setting themselves to be a better person like Captain America. And that truly is special. You see, I guess the thing when we all go is we want to be remembered for something good. And when Joe is gone, his creation is still doing so much. It's impacting the lives of so many people, and it's really touching the lives of so many people. Little kids love Captain America here and there, and they have been for decades. And adults love Captain America. And so to see someone's creation, especially my grandfather, someone so close to me, and his work be appreciated so much, I just want to make sure that they remember who was responsible. And just that way, I see so many people loving Jack Kirby and all the work that he's done, and Stanley as well. And they should be remembered for what they've done, as it's truly phenomenal. And so we have to make sure that we remember all the people that are responsible for our happiness, including Joe and other creators.
Well said. And I think we, as Captain America fans, truly do acknowledge and appreciate Joe Simon's creation and his work and his legacy. And I think it's great that as his grandson, that you are continuing to try to I guess encourage and remind people of that legacy.
I was at a comic convention, and I was online to talk with Stranko regarding some things that he had said, and a fan came up to me, and he, Stranko had to work on Captain America in the Silver Age, and a fan came up to me, and he wanted to thank me for, he wanted to thank Joe for everything that he's done, and he said Captain America means so much to him, and how amazing it is. And I remember he asked to shake my hand, and this memory I'll never forget. It's someone caring so much and appreciating it so much, and that's just, it was really nice. And what it does, it makes you want to be remembered yourself. So knowing, Joe loved going to the convention. I remember his 98th birthday, they sang happy birthday to him at New York Comic Con when he was doing a panel, and he was so happy by it. And so seeing the fans really acknowledge him and appreciate his work, just even when he's gone, a fan coming up to me and appreciating Joe's work, it makes me want to do something with my life. That makes me, what I'm trying to say is, makes me basically want to do something to affect people, so that way, even when I'm gone, they're going to still care and remember. I think everyone wants that too.
Absolutely. Just wanted to say thank you very much for joining the show. It was a pleasure talking with you and reliving some memories of your grandfather Joe, and maybe we'll see if we can have you back sometime. So in the meantime, if anybody wants to learn a little bit more about Joe Simon and his creation, you can always go to the Joe Simon Appreciation Facebook page and check it out. Check out more there. So again, thanks for joining us, Jesse, and we look forward to talking to you on the pages.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, well, that will wrap up episode 2 for Captain America Comic Book Fans podcast. Bob, I had a lot of fun talking about Strange Tales 114, Avengers 4, and interviewing Jesse Simon. I thought it was a good show.
I did too. He's an impressive young man, and he's doing a lot of great work preserving his grandfather's legacy. I think a lot of Cap fans in the future are going to owe a debt of gratitude to his work and his commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of fun. So next episode, we're going to get back to covering some comic books. I thought maybe this time we'd kind of jump forward and get to 1989 and the Mark Grunwald era, specifically the Bloodstone Hunt.
Yeah, I got to tell you that is a fan favorite, and a lot of folks look at that as one of the the pinnacles of Gru's storytelling. And of course, I think you said, it's Kieran Dwyer pencils, and he's a fabulous artist in my view, one of the best on Cap. So it's going to be a good discussion.
Yeah, I think he's a little underrated, Dwyer. I enjoy his work. So we're gonna cover issues 357 through 362, which includes the introduction of Crossbones. So that'll be a lot of fun. All right, so if you'd like to get in touch with Bob or I, feel free to join us on our Facebook page, which is Captain America Comic Book Fans. You can look that up. Or you can go to our Anchor page if you'd like to subscribe or leave a message, and maybe we'll play it in an upcoming episode. Please do subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms. Leave a review so that we always love hearing feedback from the listeners. So until then, we look forward to talking to you. Have a great one.